Today, Jen Psaki was asked about Kyle Rittenhouse and whether or not Joe Biden would apologize for implying in a video that he was a white supremacist. And Jen Psaki was basically like, what do you mean? He took pictures of the Proud Boys, right? And all of a sudden I see across Twitter people being like, well, that's securing a defamation lawsuit because it's not true. But, the problem is white supremacist is an opinion. So we will see if Kyle actually ends up filing a defamation lawsuit. Now, interestingly, in his interview with Tucker Carlson, he said the phrase actual malice, which is a legal phrase, which implies young Mr. Rittenhouse has been talking with some lawyers about what Mr. President Biden said. And it seems entirely possible. So we'll definitely get into that. We also have the Rittenhouse precedent, which is triggering a bunch of left-wing activists. They're freaking out. And the funny thing is, there's no real precedent. Self-defense has always been a privilege, an affirmative defense if you kill somebody, heaven forbid. And now they're surprised. Why? Well, these rioters got away with it for too long. I mean, for nearly a decade, I've watched these extremists go through the streets smashing and destroying and becoming emboldened. And finally now, they're actually worried that people are going to go out and defend their communities. And I got to be honest, I think there's a reasonable fear that people might go out. We don't want active conflict in that regard. And then, of course, we have the economy, which is in very serious trouble. We're being told not to buy turkeys. We're also simultaneously being told there's no turkey shortage. There is a turkey shortage. And maybe try tofurkey instead. You know what? The St. Louis Fed says tofurkey's cheaper. Try the soy-based garbage instead. Now, I think Americans not being able to get turkey is going to be a big wake-up call for a lot of people about what's happening with the Biden government and the economy. And we've got one of the best people imaginable to actually talk to us about this. We've got Peter Navarro. You want to introduce yourself?
Tim, my friend, before I do that, let me just salute you. And look, as we talk about the news today, if there's a diaspora out there of folks like you who basically are speaking truth to power, and the dissonance between what the American people are being fed on the MSNBCs and CNNs and Jen Psaki's of this world versus the reality that folks like you are bringing to the table are really important. And one of the ways I found myself here today, Tim, is through a friend, mutual friend, yes. Jack Posobiec,
yes.
right?
Right.
I mean, he's like doing really good things at Human Events. And one of the things that I listen to his podcast in the morning when I'm kind of working out a little bit at the beginning of the day, and you listen to Posobiec, it's like we find out things like the victims, right, are not Boy Scouts, right?
Right.
We find out that in
the Rittenhouse case.
In the Rittenhouse case, we find out that the mayor, the DA, and the lead detective are part of a family that seemed to be consciously trying to shape the trial in a way which is contrary to the facts. We find out that there's doctored videos that were doctored in a way to make Rittenhouse look like he would lose his self-defense thing. And so then you see Biden or Psaki saying things like they're saying, and we're at a point now, I've been around a while, got a few miles on me. We're at a point now I've never seen before. It's a total breakdown of the mainstream corporate fourth estate. There's no truth to be had anymore. And the American people aren't buying a lot of that. If you look at the polling is totally inconsistent with the narratives of the fake news. So that means they're listening to folks like Tim Pool or Jack Posobiec or a place I live a lot at, Steve Bannon's War Room as a co-host. And so I'm happy to be here with you tonight.
Absolutely,
Tim,
man.
And let's jam.
Well, who are you?
Who am I? So first and foremost, since I want to plug the heck out of this thing, I'm the author of this new book called In Trump Time.
Yes.
The title itself is something that I coined during my service in the Trump administration. I was one of only 3 senior officials in the Trump administration who was with the president all the way from the 2016 campaign, where I was the top economic and trade advisor, all the way to the end of what I like to refer to as his first term. So the In Trump Time phrase became essentially the ethos and culture of the administration, something that came up early on in the iconic Situation Room, sitting around with a bunch of these deep administrative state bureaucrats. I'm trying to, on behalf of the president, move a trade policy, and all I'm getting is pushback. And finally it was like, no. We're doing this in Trump time, which is to say as soon as possible. And you come back tomorrow with a plan to get this done in a week, not in 6 months. And if that doesn't work for you, we'd be happy to send you out to Bethesda to count paper clips in a warehouse. This is what we do. So, and that became like our, and it really became important because I went from the China hawk in the administration, the guy who was a lot behind the steel and aluminum tariffs, the China tariffs. I ran the whole Buy American, Hire American program. I did like a dozen executive orders for the president. And then suddenly it flips in January of 2020, and I turned into like the quartermaster for the pandemic, trying to figure out how to get enough PPE. And that's the subtitle of the In Trump Time book. It's my journal of America's plague year. And what I did was, it was really interesting, Tim, when I got to the White House early on, the biggest shock to me, and it was truly a shock, was that I faced as much opposition inside the White House perimeter from officials who were trying to stop the president from doing the two transformational aspects of his agenda, which was the secure borders and the fair trade policies. And so what I did was I began keeping a daily journal every night when I went home, no matter how tired I was. I recorded the notes for the day, and I did it not just because I thought I might be part of history some small or large way, but to hold people accountable for what quickly became apparent, their disloyalty to the president himself as well as to his agenda. So, I mean, that's who I am. I mean, I'm the guy who lasted the whole 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm the guy who was in charge of trade and manufacturing policy. Regardless of any bad things people say about me in my service in the White House, they'll say I was the guy who got stuff done in Trump time. And so
we got a lot to talk about, especially with the economy and everything. So we're glad to have you, man.
I'm here, brother.
All right, we got loot.
Oh yeah, we got a lot to get into.
Oh, yeah.
The U.S. Federal Reserve is telling people to eat soy to save money over turkeys. I mean, I expected some intervention, not that kind of intervention, but holy freaking cow. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. And as you know, I like being ahead of the times, and that's why today I'm wearing a shirt that says Ghislaine Maxwell did not bleep herself. If you want to know what that bleep is, you can go to thebestpoliticalshirts.com. Also, we're doing a Black Friday sale with the promo code Luke. You could get up to 15% off, and we're doing it tonight at midnight because screw the corporations. We're going to beat them at their game. We're going to do it before anyone else. Tonight, midnight, Black Friday sale, 15% off or more with promo code Luke, L-U-K-E. Hope you guys take advantage of that.
And I will say tofurkey, not that bad.
Hey, look.
Ian.
God,
Delicious.
Come on.
Delicious,
Come on,
I would
man.
say.
Everyone's like, I knew it was gonna be.
Do it.
Well, the truth is, hey, if you need to, you can pull that in if you want to leave that.
He's
Yeah,
going
you
to do a T-shirt for the End Trump Time book. Can you handle that?
Maybe.
cool.
We'll talk, and I bet we can
All right,
think of something very creative.
I got a deal for you.
Yeah.
And it's tofurkey day. This is like the Marie Antoinette of the Federal Reserve.
I know, right? It really
If you
is.
can't eat turkey, let that be
tofurkey.
tofurkey, right?
Yeah.
Why not?
Sure, why not? I am also here in the corner, and I just want to tell you, Peter, you can pull your mic up however
This
close
way,
you
yeah,
want.
okay.
Super flexible. Just
Damn,
right in front of
baby.
you. I
Here we
know,
go.
I know, so just stuff.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to have you because I really, really appreciate. I kind of offend people because I'm like, I really appreciate the voice of the older generations because I want to know.
Oh, I
if
am
this-
offended. There we go.
I know. There you go. Sorry, I'm gonna kick things off strong. But I really want to know if things have ever been this bad before because I feel like we look at it and we're like, this is insane. This is horrible. And I'm like, is it really that bad?
Is it really
But
that
I guess
bad?
we'll get into that during this episode.
So, I went through the 50s. I went through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. No,
Seen
it's
all
never
of
been
it.
this bad.
Okay,
This is
great.
sui
Wonderful.
generis. This is
Great.
This is just just
even like
brand new
Vietnam
world.
when they were like manipulating people into Vietnam. It was
No, this is that was all child's play compared to what's going on now, particularly from a macroeconomic standpoint. The problems that we are facing now, particularly with the uncertainty of when the pandemic may or may not end. Now, it's interesting. It's like in this In Trump Time book, I talk about how I was the guy in early February. Think about this. I'm the guy in early February who would write a dozen memos that would jumpstart everything from the vaccine development to the therapeutics like people are taking now, the remdesivir, the monoclonal antibodies, things like that, testing, PPE, all of that stuff. And one of the things I wrote in those early memos was that the vaccine would have to be supplemented by therapeutics, and the virus may well be around for a long time because of its ability to mutate. And that's the concern we face now. So
we got a lot more too. I mean, politics, China, the inflation and stuff like that. We'll get into all that stuff. So make sure before we get started, head over to timcast.com, become a member. We're gonna have a members only segment where we get into the nitty gritty dark stuff that I think this one's going to be pretty bold because we've already talked about a lot of stuff that's like YouTube unfriendly, and so this is serious stuff having to do with White House policy and what's going on in China with certain labs. So you definitely want to be a member, not miss this one. It'll be up around 11 or so p.m. But don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends if you really like it. Let's jump into the first story. I hate to jump right back into like the news because we were getting it going, but let's do this because this is what we had set up, and I think this is important as for the modern cultural stuff. So we have this story from The Independent. I chose The Independent on purpose for the source of this story. Psaki links Kyle Rittenhouse to Proud Boys after teenager hits out at Biden over white supremacist defamation. Secretary notes Rittenhouse's photo with right-wing group excluded from trial. Interesting. The reason I chose The Independent is because this is the outlet that claimed Kyle Rittenhouse shot 3 black people.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Which is not true. So of all of the outlets that would like to make a comment on Kyle Rittenhouse and defamation, I thought this would be the funniest one to use. The Independent says that Peter Doocy asked whether or not Mr. Biden would ever apologize to Mr. Rittenhouse for suggesting online and on TV that he's a white supremacist. And Psaki responded, the video was meant to show how Trump actively encouraged white supremacists and right-wing militia groups during his presidency. In her answer, she referred to a 2020 photo that showed Rittenhouse posing with a member of the Proud Boys. Mr. Biden, she added, spoke to the verdict last week. He has obviously condemned the hatred and division and violence we've seen around the country, committed by groups like the Proud Boys and groups that individual has posed in photos with. Doocy's question did not address the photo referenced by Psaki, blah, blah, blah. I love it. I love this idea that how many conflicts are the Proud Boys involved in? A decent amount. But have the Proud Boys ever gone out actively destroying neighborhoods, setting fires, firebombing buildings, or anything like that? Wait. Enrique Tarrio pulled down a banner that said Black Lives Matter, and they burned it in the street.
Yep.
So there was that.
A multiracial person did
Yeah.
that, by the way. And the organization is not a white supremacist organization. There's many people of color within it. And again, it's just absurd, the logic that they're using here. Okay, let's use the same logic. Joe Biden took a picture with Putin. Biden is the president of Russia. Now, come on, that's ridiculous. And
he's a Russian advocate.
Exactly. And Kyle's words against the president yesterday on that Tucker Carlson interview were very pointed, and I think he's preparing for something bigger here because he said he's accusing the president of using malice and defamation.
No.
As you mentioned before.
Actual malice. That's a legal phrase.
Yeah, exactly.
Saying someone has malice, in a public setting, like if you were like he was maliciously smearing me, or that smear was, his malice. I mean, that just basically means like they're mad at you, they don't like you. Actual malice is the legal standard by which you can sue a public figure. So here's what I think happened. I think Rittenhouse is talking to his lawyers, and they said, we believe what Biden said about you was actual malice, or maybe something to that effect. And then Kyle was like, oh yeah, in the colloquial sense, and then says it to Tucker. But it sounds like he's being, he's having these discussions. Now, truth be told, you can call someone a white supremacist, and it is not defamation. It's not. It's an opinion.
Is it okay to give Psaki a compliment? Okay,
Of course.
Because after 4 years in the White House, I gotta hand it to her. She lies.
She's pretty
much
good.
better than anybody we had. And I proposed the Jen Psaki drinking game, by the way.
Oh boy.
Which was every time she lied, you'd have to take a drink, a shot of sake, right? To see.
Perfect. I see what you did there.
And you know, it'd be a short party because everybody'd be passed out on the floor within 30 minutes of the press con. But it's really, I mean, the thing that strikes me is that, again, you asked me kind of perspective from my age and things like that. We've abandoned all notion of any kind of truth, and now it's just simply a battle of spin and narratives. I mean, it's like you wake up in the morning, and the CNN and NBC people are just lazy. They let the spin and narrative come out of the New York Times and the Washington Post, or whatever bullet points the political candidates might be sending, and then off they run with it. And then, you know, we've got folks on the other side of that. But I mean, it's just well,
NBC, they're a lot worse than that. So during the trial, an MSNBC journalist was trying to get photographs of the jury. I mean, this is
another it's like crazy. Like, can you imagine that? Like following an MSNBC reporter following a juror to their home.
The jury bus.
Yes,
all of them.
You'll never see Morning Joe wax eloquent on that. Okay,
so
it's like LeBron. Like, these people are so hypocritical. Like LeBron James on China, right? I mean, look, it's like LeBron James will be the first one to just trash this country upside the head. I mean, it's this is a terrible place to live, right? But then you got 2 million people in concentration camps in China, and it's like, can't talk about that. Didn't
some basketball player wear like shoes or something?
Yes, there was a Boston Celtics player that wore a shoe depicting LeBron bending over to, of course, China bowing down to Winnie the Pooh as he was playing against LeBron James, who's also suspended for sucker punching another player.
My hero in the NBA is Enes Kanter.
That's him. That's him.
The Turk.
He's the one who wore those shoes.
Yeah, and so he's protesting now, and guess what? He's sitting on the bench rather than playing. You know, this is not cool.
Yeah, there's another NBA star
here.
When
Colin Kaepernick protested and he eventually gets booed and nobody wants to have him around, I'm like, you get political, you get into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they should. I think we should have these debates. I think we shouldn't be afraid of politicizing things. Kwame Brown, another former NBA star, came out and he said, surprisingly, Kyle Rittenhouse acted in, quote, self-defense. He goes on to say that the case was politicized for people to make a lot of money promoting racism at the expense of a teenager. And a lot of people are resonating with those points after, of course, watching the trial that was a live stream and presented a different point of view that people were denied if, of course, they were watching the corporate media, which many of them didn't even put on the arguments that the defense was even making during this entire case, which is crazy.
You know what's crazy? So the episode, I recorded a show with Joe Rogan last week. It went up yesterday. And I was reading some comments, and people were saying, like, you know, I'm watching this I'm listening for 45 minutes, and I swear this guy's just making all this stuff up. It's because they live in the world of CNN and MSNBC.
Right.
So when I sit there and say something like, Kyle Rittenhouse didn't cross state lines with a gun. In fact, the DA, Binger, has charged Dominic Black under the same statute because of the straw purchase. And I don't think it's a straw purchase charge, but they're basically saying you provided a weapon to a minor. And then these people listen to that and they're like, that's not true. Joy Reid told me Colbert said he crossed state lines. I watch Colbert. He's lying, isn't he? And I keep saying, fact check me. Google this. Take 5 seconds. Just figure out we're telling you the truth. This is the important thing I want to say about the Kyle Rittenhouse stuff. I hope everybody remembers when it came to this show, when it came to my morning show, the 7 witnesses we had, we told you from the beginning it was self-defense. Everything that came out in the trial, maybe you're someone who only realized by watching the trial what was going on. Watch our show. You'll see we were never lying to you. We had the witnesses here tell their stories. Some of these same people who have been on this show went on to testify for the state and the defense in that trial. And sure enough, the jury said not guilty on all counts. We had Will Chamberlain here who said the gun possession was legal. The charge is bunk. Guess what? The judge said, actually, that's correct. Now, if you were watching CNN the whole time, you got punked. Yeah. We were honest with you the whole time.
Let me say one thing about CNN, too, because John Berman, New Day, just happened to hear the show in the morning talking about the case, Tim. And what just sickened me was the tone in his voice signaling that he wanted this 17-year-old person convicted. He was reporting the, quote, news, which was wrong and contradictory to everything you just said. But at the same time, you could feel in the way he was reporting it was like, oh, we've got to get this guy convicted. I mean, what a 17-year-old kid who was not guilty and found not guilty by his peers, he's being condemned to life imprisonment by the tone of that voice.
Yep.
Those people who listen to CNN, that they buy into that.
You see Colbert? Colbert said, if that's not against the law, we should change the law. Yeah. What they're really saying is, for the past decade, they have escalated their violence and their riots, and they've gotten away with it. And at this point, well, now people are starting to snap. And I don't think it's a good thing. People showing up and, what happened in Kenosha, I don't think is good in any way. But people are finally fed up. We've seen videos of people getting into fistfights with Antifa, chasing them out. Well, now what's happening is these leftist extremists are shocked and angry that, oh no, now we're dealing with resistance from people who don't want us burning down their local communities. Yeah. Now the courts have said, if you attack someone and threaten great bodily harm, there's no precedent. There's always been self-defense. Well, that offends the likes of Colbert. No, Colbert, when they were burning down buildings, when they were firebombing, government facilities, when small towns were getting looted and ransacked, where was Colbert?
Mum's the word.
Yeah. Kamala Harris was fundraising for these people to bail them out. So when this ruling comes in, they say the judge is biased. SNL does a skit about it, and they say there's white supremacy, blah, blah, blah. They're just angry that regular people have had enough of their extremism.
It's a battle of narratives. That's what we've become in this society. The media has gone into the traditional media has gone into their respective corners, and it's a battle of opinion-driven narratives, not fact-based narratives. And I'm listening to you. You actually had the witnesses on. That blows my mind. That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
You know what I realized today? When I was reading, people were commenting on Rogan's podcast, there's actually two different political compasses. So when we say Luke is right libertarian or whatever, how people want to describe it, and I'm left-leaning libertarian, and I don't know where Ian is. He's in outer space.
Yeah, pretty much.
I think I'm a libertarian.
Probably, but you're probably more authoritarian than I am.
Well, let me test you guys, okay?
Oh boy.
Because I always had trouble with the libertarians in the administration. How do you guys feel about tariffs on China?
And give me a little bit more detail.
So in the In Trump Time book, there's a great scene where I do go mano a mano with Chris Wallace on his Sunday show.
Oh,
right?
Good for you.
And it's like we're in each other's face, and he goes, "What's the problem with China?" I go, and it just pops out of my head because it's Sunday, right? It's biblical. I go, the 7 deadly sins, right? Ooh. And so I go, okay, so here's the problem. It's even get all 7. It's always a chore, okay? Okay, you start with the intellectual property theft to the tune of $500 billion a year. You got forced technology transfer, which is if you want to go and do business in China, you got to hand over your technology, right? Totally unfair trade. You've got the constant cyber hacking, both of personal individuals for their credit card, whatever, but also businesses, right? Stealing their IP, another form. You've got what's called dumping, which is sending product below cost into markets as a way of pushing the domestic producers out and grabbing hold of those markets. You have China's state-owned enterprises. I'm up to 5 now, right?
Yeah,
See, these are the national champions they send out with the full power of the state to go out and do battle, and why it's China building our subway systems instead of American companies. Currency manipulation, which is like China lowers the value of their currency, which makes their exports here cheaper and our exports to them more expensive, so our trade deficit goes up. And then there's the 7, is the killing of Americans with deadly fentanyl. And that's both a health crisis as well as an economic thing, because a lot of the people who die from fentanyl are working age manufacturing blue-collar workers, okay? So the libertarian, the traditional libertarian view is that, well, if China wants to sell us cheap goods, we should just benefit from them. And what I'm going is, no. It's like, that's a form of economic aggression. If you take it as like a snapshot and you go into Walmart and stuff's cheap, that's cool, okay. But if you play it like as a movie over time and all your jobs go offshore and your wages are driven down and people go to the unemployment line and workers wind up committing suicide because they don't have jobs, that's a serious thing. So I get back, and like in the In Trump Time book, I identify this set of what I called the Wall Street transactionalists, like Mnuchin at Treasury, Kudlow at the National Economic Council, Mulvaney, big libertarian. It's like I try to do like buy American policies or China tariffs, and these guys freak out. So I'll throw it back to you guys, libertarian. Do you do tariffs on China to protect yourself?
Well, there's 2 different libertarians now. You've got the Mises Caucus and you've got the establishment, old school type libertarians, and they disagree on a lot of things. Yeah. So I think the Mises guys are like pro borders, right?
Yeah, very much so. I think so. Yeah.
So they're probably going to say we have to protect American workers in America, and then I think their view is more like within the area that we can protect, we have libertarian values and views on how things are run. Yeah. But we recognize, outside of the borders. So I don't know if that's exactly their view, but I would say my view is similar to that. Like, I don't want China ripping off American workers using economic coercion and warfare to try and destroy this country. So everything within the borders, I believe in, we're very libertarian, individual liberties, individual rights, civil rights, etc. And then when it comes to international trade and stuff, we must protect the people in our community.
Here's an interesting stat for you folks. Our trade deficit with China is roughly equivalent to the People's Liberation Army defense budget. Huh. So, and by the way, it's Tuesday, and Friday is not just Friday. It is Black Friday. Mm-hmm. And that's when everybody's going to be going to the big box, baby, Walmart, Target, whatever. And a lot of that stuff they're going to buy when they pick up that made in China stuff is actually going to be plows into swords, plowshares into swords, because that stuff is, that money, our trade deficit, goes to fund all of their weapons. And what drives me nuts is you asked at the beginning who I am. It's like the way I met Donald Trump, and I talk about it in the In Trump Time book because there was some confusion there. I wrote a trilogy of China books, right? 2006, The Coming China Wars. 2011, The Death by China book and film. And then those were economic based. And then 2015, Crouching Tiger, which was the rise of the Chinese military. So like in 2015, I write this book and say, yeah, China's developing these hypersonic missiles that can kill us with nuclear weapons, right? Okay, so that's like 6 years ago. And so China, just a couple of weeks ago, they fly a hypersonic plane around in low orbit, which is capable of bristling with weapons, and everybody's go, wow, that's surprising. Oh my gosh. No, it's not. It's like in 2006, I predicted in the Coming China Wars that China would create a global pandemic because of the way they handled the viruses, and it was based on my research of how SARS-1 came about. My point here is that China is an existential threat. You got Joe Biden say it's just simply a competitor. And part of what I've been trying to do and what President Trump was absolutely transformative about was to raise people's awareness, as they used to say in the 60s, about the threat of communist China, the Chinese Communist Party coming after us. And they're coming after us. And it is.
So what do the tariffs do? How will that help?
So the way tariffs work, if you have a country like China that is dumping product in or stealing or whatever, the tariffs, first and foremost, offset the advantage that they've gotten from the unfair trade. So that's your first best, right? But what we were also trying to do with China was to get them to the bargaining table. So in some sense, the tariffs were a penalty for things like intellectual property theft or currency manipulation. So it was fascinating. The first chapter of the book, I call it the Red Wedding chapter, in homage to Game of Thrones. But we're sitting there in the East Wing, and the president's about to sign this skinny trade deal where we're supposed to deal with this economic aggression. And it's like I'm fighting the Wall Street transactionalists because all they were concerned is if China buys some more soybeans or whatever. They weren't focused on the core problem. But we had this strategy. It was called dragon in a pot. Like, think about this. It's like we knew that there would be resistance to tariffs initially among a certain segment of the public. But to get people to accept them, what we did, this was brilliant, President Trump, he got China to enter into negotiations. Every time China did something in those negotiations which was unfair, we'd raise the tariffs. And that allowed us over time to steadily increase the tariffs to over $100 billion of tariffs. And in a second term, I'll say this for the record, and I've talked many times with the president about this, we would have completely raised tariffs on everything to 100% and began to do what I believe has to be done, which is decouple from communist China. Because every time China makes another dollar off the United States or Europe or whatever, it's able to fuel both its military machine, but also the war China's conducting, like through the so-called Belt and Road Initiative. I don't know if you guys have talked about that, but so it's basically the colonization of Africa, Latin America, Kazakhstan, and everything like that. I mean, they've got a strategy, and the advantage they have over us as a democracy is that we change governments and officials every 4 years, right? And these guys that I would see, I sat, Psaki at the G20 across from Xi Jinping and his merry band of apparatchiks. Same thing in Buenos Aires. Many times I went to Beijing. My point here is that these guys across the table had been there for years, and they will be there for years. Yeah. And I'll be gone. And instead now in Biden land, they've got a bunch of appeasers and people who here's the way they do this, Tim. It's like there's money pots and honey pots. Okay, the honey pot is Eric Swalwell in California, right? Sleeping his way up and down the coast with a Chinese spy. I joked he had like STDs, like spy transmitted diseases, right? That's the honey pot, right? But the money pots are much more insidious because what China will do with government officials is like they'll give them like trips to Beijing, or they'll put them in a think tank. They'll give them grants at universities, and these people become beholden to the Chinese, and then they wind up like Jake Sullivan as the national security advisor, right? I mean, this is crazy stuff.
Well, they'll just do business dealings with Biden's sons, and I agree with your point when it comes to decoupling, especially from China's pharma industry, which the United States is heavily reliant on. But I think previously what you were describing was globalization instead of libertarianism, because when we look at what China's doing, they're treating China like a conduit for a multinational corporate takeover of the world, and people are using China as a slave factory to produce the goods. But this was all started under Henry Kissinger, who literally took manufacturing jobs from the United States, deindustrialized, and then took all the jobs to China. Yeah. And now China now has taken a lot of workforce, a lot of economic opportunities from the American people. And obviously, if someone steals from you, that's not libertarianism. There should be consequences, and you should have a right to contract with who you want to contract with. And we shouldn't be contracting with people who are stealing from us. So that libertarian kind of idea still holds strong to me. But because of the multinational corporations having so much power and influence buying out the U.S. government, we don't have libertarianism. We don't even have capitalism. We have socialism for the super rich, which is orchestrated by elites like Kissinger. You had a strong reaction to Kissinger.
I take a really good, short but nice shot at Henry. Yes, he's the dumbest, one of the dumb smart guys you meet along the way, who's made millions and millions and millions of dollars from that. The funny thing about these corporations, though, and General Electric is the poster child for this. All of these American corporations who thought they could go over to China, offshore all the jobs and things like that, wound up getting destroyed over there. They got stripped of their technology, and they wound up having competitors over there who were Chinese. And then if you look like GE, it's like it hit its peak. It was at its apex. Then the moment it started to go over to China, that was the end of that corporation. Now, again, I'm old enough to remember when GE was the most important and powerful corporation in the world. Today, it's like China just took that.
But let's talk about the ramifications of the Biden administration's policies in one of the most ridiculous ways we can. Oh, yes. From the St. Louis Fed on Twitter, they say from the Fred blog, a Thanksgiving dinner serving of poultry costs $1.42. A soybean-based dinner serving with the same amount of calories costs 66 cents and provides almost twice as much protein. Now, they're not saying outright, don't buy turkey, but we get what they're saying. Now, hold on. It would not be an establishment if the media did not jump in and join in as well. So Google search, don't buy turkeys. And what do you see? Well, here's from Mahoning Matters. There's no turkey shortage, but don't wait to buy. From the Des Moines Register, why is there a turkey shortage? Then from Consumer Reports, there is no turkey shortage, followed by PETA, who tells you not to eat turkey. So the prices are going up.
Yeah.
We went to, we got a fresh turkey. We went to a farm and we pre-ordered. Like they actually raised a turkey from June and got all big, and then this past Sunday. And they told us, you can't get them in most places. If you want a turkey, good luck. And now that's why the media is telling people, hey, don't get mad you're not having turkey for Thanksgiving. You don't want turkey anyway, right? Hey, this soy stuff is cheaper and better for you. How about that? Now that, and people say to me, that's not Joe Biden's fault this is happening. And I've said over and over again, I've done long segments talking about why it is Joe Biden's fault, one of which is the inflation, gas prices, speculation. I can get into it. But let me ask you, because you're the economics guy. What is it with the Biden administration that's resulting in inflation, high gas prices, food shortages? What is it?
Let me take you back to 2016 in the Trump campaign, and we had a mantra there, the way we were going to grow the economy, and it was simple. It was tax cuts, not to benefit the corporations, but simply to encourage them to bring jobs onshore. It was deregulation to lower the costs and make us more globally competitive. It was energy independence and cheap energy, which again makes us more competitive, puts more money in consumers' pockets to help them be able to buy more and increase their wages. And most of all, it was fair trade. It was stopping the attacks, not just by China on us, but India, Europe, and everywhere else where we had the lowest tariffs in the world and everybody was taking advantage of us. Now, all of those, Tim, are what we call structural changes in the economy designed to increase growth and do it in a way where the productivity would increase and therefore real wages would rise and inflation would be held down. That's the structural macroeconomic approach to prosperity. Now, if you think about what went before that and what has come after that, that answers your question. Before that, what the Biden-Obama administration did for 8 years was double the national debt from $10 to $20 trillion. Think about that. It went from $10 trillion to $20 trillion. That was pure, what we call in economics, pure Keynesian stimulus designed to stimulate the economy, but it didn't work because they didn't address the underlying structural changes. All we got was this, I don't know if you remember the phrase, the new normal. This was like slow growth and stagnant wages. Okay, so we come to Trump, things boom, and then Biden takes over. What has he done? He's reversed all 4 points of the Trump economic growth compass, right? He wants to raise taxes, right? He's slamming on more regulations. He's made just the worst mockery and ruin of our energy policy, and now we're begging the Saudis to pump oil. I'll try a little. Comedy's always hard, but here's a little comedy for you. At the football game tailgates now before the games, they're eating caviar because it's cheaper than cooking hot dogs with propane, right?
There's wing shortages.
Yes, and there's wing shortages. And then the other thing is, like, my job at the White House, as I talk about in the Trump Time book, was supply chains, right? If you have your manufacturing here and your supply chains will stay here. Those are resilient. If you send your factories offshore, here's the thing. Supply chains follow them, right? And therefore you have fragile supply chains at best, broken ones at worst. And so what's happening with the Biden economy right now is there's not enough attention being paid to making it here. Like, I actually wrote the order for the Keystone Pipeline when we first got in. It was the coolest thing. It happened early, but it was cool. I literally did this in 20 minutes. It was probably the fastest executive order ever written, right? But Biden undid that quicker. Right, the stroke of the pen, and so go ahead.
The Keystone Pipeline, I think, is the easiest way to explain to people the rise in prices.
Yeah.
So the first thing you'll get from like USA Today is they'll say Biden's policies are not causing gas and prices to increase and not causing inflation. And then when it comes to the Keystone Pipeline, they'll say the pipeline wasn't set to deliver oil for some time anyway, so shutting it down had no impact on the amount of energy we had. But what it did is that it signaled to many investors and many companies the supply chain for oil is not going to meet the requirements in the coming years, which means buy now because those prices are going up. Speculators then start buying up in fear that we won't have enough in the future, so the prices instantly start spiking. Then when gas prices start spiking, the cost of everything goes up right afterwards. You got to drive to work. Well, I need more money for work, boss, because the gas is too expensive. You want to get corn shipped to the plant to make whatever you got to make in food. The truck's got to spend more for gas. You got to spend more on corn.
And guess what? The frackers, we are like the Saudi Arabia of frackers, Pennsylvania, whatever.
North Dakota.
The frackers, when these prices go up now, are not going to up production to have that adjustment because they don't believe they'll be allowed to frack under the Biden regime, to your point about signaling. And that's a shrewd thing, Tim, because that's like one of the core principles in economics about signaling theory. Somebody actually won the Nobel Prize back in talking about it, and that's the problem we have. And it's just absurd. This is nuts. I mean, we're sitting on literally with a Saudi Arabia of natural gas, and natural gas prices are through the friggin' roof. That makes no sense. And watching Joe Biden beg, not just to the Saudis, but to the Russians. I mean, OPEC is basically, okay, here's a quiz. Let's see if you guys who get this right. So it's probably so Biden's just released oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. How many days or months of oil? Lydia,
I know this one.
Go, baby.
This one because we use 18.9 billion barrels of gallon per day, right? So it's going to last us like 2.5 days. 3 days.
Boom.
Very
To your point, signaling theory. Yeah, that's really going to drive things down.
And
you know what Saudi did as soon as we did that?
What?
They offset it.
Oh, of course.
They cut back production.
Actually.
Wow. So they're strangling us out on purpose.
Oh, well, the Saudis, like one of the things I regret during the Trump administration, and this isn't in the Trump Time book, was how the Saudis screwed our frackers when they started flooding the market with oil.
Yeah.
See, the fracking thing. There's a threshold, right, which is much relatively higher than pumping from fields, right? The traditional way. So if you want to kill the frackers, all you do is have to keep the price of oil $5 below that threshold. So the Saudis did that. They've done that like 2 or 3 times.
So real quick, for people who don't know, there's something called energy returned on energy invested. And fracking for a long time didn't make sense because the cost to actually frack wasn't worth what you'd get out of it. But when energy prices reached a certain threshold, all of a sudden the cost stays the same, but the energy is now more valuable. They start fracking. Yeah. All of a sudden we find ourselves, as you mentioned, the Saudi Arabia of fracking. A lot of left-wing activists really don't like it. They really don't like it. but it ultimately helps us become energy independent.
Yeah, and a lot of these arguments are being made. We need to stop domestic oil production to help the environment, when in reality, we're literally shipping it from Saudi Arabia. Yeah, Saudi Arabia is doing what's right for Saudi Arabia, as of course anyone would. That's why they're cutting down production.
I thought according to Jen Psaki, Saudi Arabia had their own like cone where all the carbon stays over there, right?
Nice.
Yes,
of
course. That's exactly how it works.
Okay.
It's not existent
all right, we got to
third world.
We got to have a hit of Psaki.
But we got to understand what's happening. Donald Trump also, I criticized him during his presidency because he was very close with the Saudis, whether with the weapons deal, whether with geopolitics. They were hand in hand, and I believed he deserved a lot of criticism for that, personally myself. But CNN had a very interesting headline talking about this kind of energy crisis. Recently, they had a headline that said, quote, "Why Biden can't do much to ease gas prices." And a couple days ago, they had another article that said oil prices are finally falling thanks to China and Joe Biden. Literally contradicting themselves, just pushing for the narrative. They had another piece today that was talking about the problems with the inflation narrative, and they blamed everything on it's all OPEC's problem. It's all OPEC's fault. No, it's not. No,
well, let's get into the specifics on the strategic oil thing. We have this story from Timcast.com. Biden administration to use strategic petroleum reserve to lower gas prices. The White House will release 50 million barrels of crude oil. This is it's. I don't think that regular Americans who like lean Democrat understand signaling and how the actions of the administration not the hard actions, but like what people feel and see based on what's happening will have an impact. So I'll give the example I just gave. When Biden says we're shutting down Keystone, well, of course, Keystone wasn't transporting oil. So oil supply is unchanged. But people are predicting for the future. If we have X growth, we're going to need X% oil increase.
And investing for the future.
And investing
or not
for the future.
Investing for the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when Biden shuts down Keystone and bans fracking on certain lands, all of a sudden people say, whoa, we're not going to have enough supply in 3 years. We better buy it now. Everybody rushes. Everybody buys. Prices skyrocket. Then what does Biden do? Oh, no, something I did is causing a spike in prices. Let's dip into the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which is for what? Economic disasters and war and other crises, and start pulling out 50 million barrels to try and get the prices down. This is another signal. It's going to be it's an entropic failure. It's a downward spiral that's going to slowly spin more and more chaos. This move from Biden is going to cause more people to be like, we are in bad shape. Prices are probably going to go up because of the action of doing this. What you mentioned, the 50 million barrels of crude oil is what, 2.5 days?
Lydia got that right. She got the quiz right.
So Biden thinks putting out 2.5 days worth of petroleum is going to help ease prices. It's going to jack prices up.
Remember, Bidenomics is kind of interesting. It's like he's pushing this latest $3.5 trillion bill they want to pass, and he's saying that's going to take inflation down and pay for itself. Now, in what world would that possibly happen? To have like a massive dose of Keynesian spending, which is, look, we had a $2 trillion bill that we were trying to get passed before the election at a time when the economy needed some help. But here's the difference. Our focus was on bringing our manufacturing home. We were going to spend most of that money as a way of promoting Buy American, Hire American. And I think you mentioned, Luke, the medicines and things like that. There's a whole chapter in the In Trump Time book about this executive order I wrote on what's called essential medicines and medical countermeasures. And it was a Buy American order to basically bring home all of that stuff we need. The pandemic was a wake-up call to us.
Yeah, majority of our medicines and also things that you need for medical procedures are produced in China.
China and some of that stuff is in India. Like if you take like medicines, there's the fixed dosage form, which is the end product, which you get. But in between, there's the base chemicals and then there's the intermediate. And the base stuff is like really pollution heavy if you're not careful about it. And since India and China are not, they dominate the market. So we're kind of stuck. So when the pandemic hit, like India started, it's like 80 countries began rationing either medicines or machines or both when that pandemic hit. It's like, it's kumbaya. Like, let's all reason together. No. Economic nationalism is what happens when the stuff hits the fan.
Yeah, the United States stole a plane, correct me if I'm wrong, from France that had PPP in it. Do you remember that?
That one I don't remember. Okay. But I do have a cool one I can tell you from the book. This was like, let's call it the Italian swab job. Remember the movie Italian Job with Mark Wahlberg? Okay, so I'm sitting in my office. It's like a Friday late on a Friday afternoon, just working my butt off because the pandemic was like going crazy. I get a call from Health and Human Services, and it's like we got 1 million swabs stuck in the Italian Alps because Northern Italy's just getting hit with a pandemic. It's like, can you help, right? So it's like, this was the cool part of the job. This was really cool. It's like, all right. So I call the sit room, the situation room. It's like, the cool thing about the situation room is like literally you could track down anybody on the planet within 5 minutes, like if you need to, right? Cool. It's like, hey, I need Tim Pool. Get his ass on the phone. Yes, sir, right? They'll find you. You might be playing your guitar or something, don't want to talk to me, but they'll find you, right?
I never answer my phone.
Anyway, so I get the Pentagon to agree to send a plane from the factory, right? And so while it's in the air, I realized that, well, we got to get the swabs to like 6 cities. So I call up the CEO of FedEx, tracked him down through the sit room, Fred Smith, and say, hey, Fred, look, we got to get these swabs out. Can you get us some of your planes? He said, yeah, why don't you divert the plane to Memphis? We'll have 6 planes waiting for you there. Wow. So it's like from the time I got the call to the time we actually landed the swabs in the 6 different cities, like 72 hours. It was pretty cool. But that's the kind of stuff we were doing in the middle of the pandemic. One of the other stories in the In Trump Time book is worth sharing. It's like the homicide detectives in New York City were being forced to go in and process people who were this awful, people who died of COVID, right? Mm-hmm. The homicide, because there wasn't enough frontline responders to do that, right? And so they're freaking out because they don't have enough equipment. So the chief of police emails the White House, and I did Monahan. I pull it up, and he goes, help, SOS here. So I called these two really cool folks at General Dynamics and another company, and Phoebe Novakovic in particular, and say, hey, can you get me some Tyvek suits? See, these are like the kind of space age type suits, right? And within 15 hours of getting that email, we had 4,000 Tyvek suits coming from all around the country. From these 2 defense contractors. That's the thing I was so proud of this country, when you saw good corporations who would rise to the occasion. And then I had to deal with bad ones as well, like Pfizer or Honeywell, who just were in it for the money, Tim.
I want to ask you about what Joe Biden was doing, a few key points that I've brought up, and with your expertise, having worked in this, worked in the White House and all this stuff. So I see Joe Biden, more regulations, right? We see him say he wants, the Democrats in general, they want to raise wages. They want higher minimum wage and all that stuff. And I'm all for people getting paid. I just don't believe that you can just tell people to do it. It happens because there's a big machine of economics. But they want to raise corporate taxes. They want to eliminate tariffs and raise wages. These 3 things, correct me if I'm wrong, you end up with a corporation in the United States who says, okay, we're just told by the Biden administration and the Democrats, they want our corporate taxes to go up 5%. So now we're going to lose X dollars per year here in the United States. They also are saying we have to pay more. So now we're going to lose X% more in rising wages. But they're getting rid of the tariffs. Hell, let's move the factory to China. Then we'll pay people dirt. You got to pay people dirt. We're not going to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so what Biden has done is he's incentivized these companies to leave and take American jobs.
Yes.
And now the funny thing is people say, what has Joe Biden done? It's not his fault. It's a pandemic. And I'm like, if you just watch what he's doing, and then we look at this thing with the oil, it's like when the ports got backed up, he announces, we're going to keep these ports up and running 24/7 or whatever. You extend the hours and allow people, which didn't address the actual problem, that they couldn't do anything with empty shipping containers. But of course, Biden comes out and says, I'm going to do a thing. And then these people are satisfied by it. They're like, oh, well, Biden's doing stuff. And then nothing changes. Things continue to get worse. At a certain point, Biden's approval rating is in the gutter. I mean, by almost every poll's got him in the 30s at this point. Yeah. Independent voters, approval rate for independent voters, 24% on civics. He's in the gutter because people are finally waking up and being like, yo, I think these Biden admin people are burning this country to the ground.
But he's happy every morning because he looks at the poll numbers and Kamala's below him.
Ah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Hey, that's an adult reference there. Kamala doesn't
sorry.
do that all the time.
No,
He doesn't do it all the time, okay?
No intention.
Her polling is below. Is worse than Biden's.
Yes. To be clear, yes.
I took it somewhere else.
Don't want to get the censors out there.
Luke is the one who made that dirty.
That was
Luke.
Hey, you can't fault me here.
But Tim, your point is so well taken because look, again, it's like confusing structural problems with this Keynesian kind of approach to thing. It's like here's the only way real wages go up. It's if people's productivity increases, right? Mm-hmm. If people's productivity increases, their real wages will go up. If you simply increase the minimum wage at a time where inflation is going faster than any rise you can do, I mean, workers aren't going to be better off. But if you also raise the corporate tax and you have less investment, as Tim, you point out, the jobs are going off to China, staying here, the productivity goes down as well. So it's like the thing that
but
they
it's
just
also
don't
massive,
understand basic economics.
It's also massive money printing.
He does understand.
You've said more sensible economic principles in the last half hour than any of the Biden officials have said since they got there.
I think I think they definitely do, because if you look at what's been happening, who's been benefiting from this? U.S. billionaires have gotten a 62% raise during the pandemic. There's a large transfer of wealth happening right now from the very poor to the super rich. Yeah. And who's benefiting? Who's calling the shots? Well, obviously the billionaires are getting their way. Mom and pop shops were destroyed during the pandemic, while of course Walmart, Costco, Amazon, all those other big box stores were allowed to be open, as we were told 2 weeks to slow the spread, which was ridiculous. We all sacrificed, but the other corporations got to do whatever they wanted to do.
You want to know what's really amazing? I was reading this op-ed on the economy back in 2019 because the economy was booming. It was huge. I mean, from my personal experience, I tell the story of when we were setting up our first studio. The lady at the furniture store said 2019 was the best year of my life.
Good year.
People were making money. Our contractor who was doing work in the yard was like the best year I've had. So I'm reading this op-ed, and they said that all of these things, the leftists claim they wanted, 4-day work weeks, higher wages, paid vacation, family leave, are happening thanks to capitalism and a good economy. The government need not force it. The machine is working. The policies are working. And then what happens? These leftists say, we demand these things. So when these things start happening, naturally, they vote for Joe Biden, who reverses all of the things that Trump did and then end all of that really great stuff and make a terrible economy occur. So the thing is, if you have good economic policy, the economy starts working, starts coming back. The machine starts churning. You got to lubricate the gears, get them going. And when you have bad policy, you put gum in the works, things slow down and fall apart. These leftists seem to think, I know people should be paid more money. I know, we'll force people to pay them more money, as if that manifests money or economic value or labor value. It doesn't. Yeah. So when they came in with the hammer to try and bash the system, which was already doing what they wanted, they broke it.
Yeah. Let me introduce a concept here, which I think would be useful to your viewers. I call them service sector refugees. It's kind of at the heart of the pandemic shock that we're facing that's going to create stagflation, which is simultaneous inflation and slow growth or recession. And if you think about what the pandemic has done, it's been like a neutron bomb to our major metropolitan areas. If you think about it, it hits like the core foundation of major cities. It's like the mass transit, it's the entertainment districts, but most of all, it's the high-rise office buildings, right? And so we've gone from a world where in New York or Dallas or Chicago, the high-rise buildings were at 90% occupancy rate or higher. Now they're down like to Kamala's approval rating, like 29, 30%, stuff like that. Now think about this. It's like the white collar folks, to your point as to who's like winning in the pandemic economy, the white collar folks are sitting out in the burbs, right? Commuting on their little iPads or whatever they've got. They're living okay, right? Although they might have to have tofu for turkey, but that's another story. But those people who used to be part of the eco-structure of the cities, the janitors in the buildings, the trucks outside, the food trucks, the beauticians, this, that, and the other thing, they don't have anywhere to go. And moreover, they don't have the skills to transit. So we've got this weird thing, Tim, where you got like 10 million or so people unemployed and 10 million or so job openings. That is weird. And so I get back to the central tenets of the Trump administration, which is buy American, hire American. If we don't build more of what we consume here, those service and help train those people, those service sector refugees are simply going to fade away into oblivion. And by the way, I mean, the millennials, as Bannon loves to point out on the War Room, are turning into like modern day serfs. Like you're not going to own a car, you're not going to own a home, but you can put that virtual reality thing on your head, and life looks pretty good there for a while, where you stone out on some Maui Wowie.
I would love to ask you this because in the beginning of Trump's presidency, he was kind of battling with the Federal Reserve. He was clashing heads with the Federal Reserve. Obviously, the Federal Reserve has been printing money out of thin air. That's why this kind of promotion of GMO Monsanto soybeans is absolutely ridiculous. They shouldn't be giving out nutritional advice. They should stop printing money out of thin air. But what was going on with the Trump administration, with, of course, them just literally printing money during the pandemic and giving it to all the hedge funds, giving it to all the Wall Street bankers, giving them a huge bailout? Well,
another shameless plug for in Trump time, but there is a great story about Jerome Powell in there, and it goes something like this. So, it comes time to appoint a new Fed chairman. It was either going to be Janet Yellen, give her another term, or somebody else, right? And so Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, who I state flat out in the In Trump Time book, if he had never come to the administration, Donald Trump would still be president.
Wow.
This guy did, breaking news here too, this guy did so much damage. But one of the things he did was he was the guy who recommended Jay Powell get appointed, right? And he did it under the assumption, because Steve's a control freak, he thought he can control Jay Powell. Now, Jerome Powell did something that is kind of contrary to what you just said, but I'll come back to you being right. What we were doing with our 4 points of that economic compass I described earlier is we were able to grow much more faster than the Biden-Obama regime and do so without inflation. Okay? The only reason why the Fed should raise interest rates or tighten the money supply is if there's any hint of inflation. What Jerome Powell did, that SOB, he ran contractionary monetary policy in the middle of the beautiful Trump boom under the false assumption that somehow there was going to be inflation. So in our time, on our watch, as I talk about it in the book, he was too contractionary. We could have hit 4% growth instead of 3% growth, and that's a million job difference. Okay, so fast forward now, right? It's like he is Biden's guy now. He's auditioning for the job. What does Biden want? Biden wants easy money to stimulate the economy. But what Powell is doing is contrary again to the facts in evidence. Tim, as he starts doing all the stuff you're talking about in terms of Biden undoing what Trump did, that's provoking all manner of inflation. You add to that the pandemic shocks, and basically let me go back to the 70s. The 70s stagflation came about because of profligate fiscal policy. Check that box here with all the Congress is doing. What Arthur Burns did for Nixon in monetary policy as the chairman of the Fed was to print money and be too expansionary. That's exactly what Jay Powell's doing now. Check that box. And then what kicked off the stagflation was the cost push food and energy price shocks of the 70s, and we got the same thing here. And by the way, you mentioned this earlier, Tim, and you were absolutely right. If energy prices go up, guess what? Food prices go up because things like fertilizer, which are energy driven, go up. And by the way, delivering the food and other things go up. And so we're not Jay Powell he's a pox on this world, and the fact that we're going to see him for another term, Trump couldn't wait to get rid of that guy. And we sat around scheming all the time about how if we could take him out before his term was up. And whenever I wanted to troll that friggin' Mnuchin in the Oval, I'd look at the boss and say, boss, who was that who wanted Jay Powell at the Fed?
So the other thing, too, is it's not just inflation. It's shrinkflation, where products get smaller. Prices. Yes. But now we actually we have this story, from Timcast.com. Yeah. And I got to tell you, this is typically not something I think would be a big story. But look at this. General Mills to raise prices by 20%.
That's a big
20%.
Yeah.
That is massive. Yep. So you want to talk about your kids having cereal in the morning?
Yeah.
You know what really, really grinds my gears? When I've been saying over and over again for the past several years, like, you need to stand up for what you believe in now. You need to get out there. You need to advocate for what you want to see in this world. Peaceful, persuasive, resourceful. And I get people saying, like, if I speak up at my job, then I'll lose my job. And you don't understand. I got kids to feed.
Well,
tell me now. As the food shortages, with the price increases, with the shrinkflation, and they're gonna raise the price. Your rice checks, your Cheerios. The kid wakes up for a bowl of cereal, and now you're wondering why it's 20% more. But not only that, the boxes are smaller, and you're buying twice as often.
Yeah, and the food banks are reporting that they're even having a hard time feeding people because of the inflation, because of the supply chain shortages. So, Peter, I was going to ask you, how bad does this get?
I'm always looking for the silver lining here. It's like parents will need to buy fewer diapers because they won't be able to feed the kid as much.
Actually, wait.
Obesity's a real problem.
And by the way,
wait. There's one more point there. You don't got to worry about buying new clothes for your kids when they get bigger. Yeah, they're not going to grow as they don't eat.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
we do have an obesity crisis.
That's right.
But Peter, how bad does this get? Where does this?
This is what I'm concerned about. And again, I get back to Lydia's question and point. It's like, got a lot of miles on this bod. I have never seen it as bad. This is like the 70s on steroids. Ugh. And so the way the 70s evolved, that literally, as we came in from, it started with Lyndon Johnson in 68 with the refusal of choosing between the Vietnam War expenditures and the Great Society. Okay, there's this concept in economics called guns versus butter. It's like you have to choose one or the other in some combination in order to maintain the budget. It's like LBJ was, we're not going to do it. We're going to do both, right? So that was the fiscal stimulus that began the whole process, and then so it's this whole stagflation didn't end till 1981, and the way it ended was brutal. In 1980, when Reagan ran against Carter, there was this thing called the misery index. It was inflation rate plus unemployment, and it was 20% by the time that election rolled around. Mortgage rates were like 13 and 15%. I mean, this is like stuff that's not in the people who are viewing and listening to the show can't even imagine this because they've grown up in an era of like 2, 3, 4% mortgage rates. No. This they were like 12 and 15%.
No,
right?
my parents tell me this.
Yes.
They were like, when you were a little kid, it was like 12%.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. So the way it was fixed, and this is instructive, was in two ways. Paul Volcker came along as Federal Reserve Chairman. Never confuse Paul Volcker with Jerome Powell. And he induced the mother of all recessions to wring inflationary expectations out of the economy. And the only reason why that worked is because Reagan came along and did all the structural kind of changes that we've been talking about, guys. And that basically reset the economy, and then we went off on our 80s boom. But that'll be a hard trick to redo because it requires both a smart Fed chairman and somebody as president who understands kind of the structural changes. This could go on for a decade.
And I mean, we're at 28 trillion, I think, is the deficit right now. He's looking at printing 3 trillion more to put it to 31. How do you, with the amount of having to pay interest on that, I don't see it ever being able to come back from this at this point. Where it's like, other than like, I don't know, economic default or something. Like we'll default on the U.S. dollar and create a new currency or something.
This is like Pelosi's Hail Mary and big go Brandon to the world here, because if she gets away with this latest bill, this last piece of the multi-trillion-dollar pipe dream, progressive, socialist, Marxist cut of puzzle, because there's nothing in that bill that will strengthen the economy, to be clear. It's mostly a redistribution, and it's a subsidy to China because they're all the ones that are going to be providing the electric vehicle stuff. Okay, let's be clear. If they are able to get this one across the finish line, you're absolutely right that this will be with us and our children and our grandchildren forever. So there's a lot at stake here, and it's like, I think right now we're virtually assured of the Republicans taking back the House, but it may be too late. But the other thing I'll say about that is, like, right now, I'm a Trump guy, right? I'm a MAGA guy. I'm a deplorables guy, right? But there's a battle in the Republican Party itself between the rhino corporatist party of Davos Republicans, represented by Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, Liz Cheney, Ben Sass, those folks, Mitt Romney, versus the Trumpers, who really want things like secure borders, fair trade, buy American, manufacturing here. And if we lose that battle, if we win the House in 22 and McConnell and McCarthy are still leaders, we've lost the House.
Well, so let me ask you, you say you're a MAGA guy, deplorable guy, and all that stuff, and a lot of people are saying there's going to be a red tsunami because at this point, I think a lot of regular Americans are ready to vote for a ham sandwich over the Democrats. But like you said, if we don't primary a lot of these establishment, neocon types, then it's all going to be for nothing. But there's the big question. You mentioned Carter and Reagan, the misery index. Reagan came in and didn't he against Carter wasn't like a major blowout election, like he's just swept ridiculously well, I believe, right?
I think that was that election. Wasn't that 84?
Was that?
No, that was 80.
I remember 80. Okay.
It was 80?
80, yeah.
Well, so
Carter was in at 76. Mm-hmm. It was kind of interesting.
Well, I want to ask you, based on what you saw then and what's happening now, first, is Trump running? We've all heard that he is, but I'm interested in what you think. And do you think Trump would landslide? I mean that figuratively, internet. Like, will he have a? They take it so literally. Like, Tim said Trump landslide. It's a figurative statement about Trump winning very, very well. Do you think Trump, if he does, do you think he's going to run? And if he does, do you think he'll just smash through the election?
Look, I think that in 22 we have the prospect of picking up the largest amount of seats, the largest swing ever, that it'll make the Gingrich revolution look quaint by comparison. But the one thing I know in politics is that short time frames. Mm-hmm. I mean, 2024 is a long time. Wait, everybody around here, everybody's disabled. Are you assuming that it's going to be Biden or Kamala? I mean, what about Gavin Newsom? They might even dust off Cuomo or who knows what. Matt McConaughey, right? Might run or the one I think that. Okay, let me make a bold prediction here. I'll be back here in 2024. Michelle Obama.
Yep.
That's what I've been saying.
I think my money's on Buttigieg.
I thought they'd do Michelle Obama in 2020. Because I can't believe they tried Biden.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well,
they got it.
No, but let's all remember how Biden got there, because this was, I take it, you're more of a Bernie bro
Not really, no. How dare you? You just Peter, you just
That's me.
insulted me more than you could ever imagine. You hurt my feelings.
You look
I
like
will
a
never
Bernie brother.
You
You're
should have wore the Gadsden flag.
I will never
Were you-
recover from this.
Were you a Trump guy in 2016?
I don't believe-
hang
yeah,
on.
yeah.
Now, come on. In
I
2016.
don't like any of them.
No,
I don't
in
like
2016.
politicians. I mean, obviously.
Ron Paul.
I'm
were,
more.
were you involved politically in 2016?
I don't like politics.
Come on.
No.
Were you involved?
No.
He'd vote for Ron Paul. That's who he'd vote
Yeah.
for.
Okay.
If
All right,
anyone.
fair enough.
Yeah.
So,
Do you vote in
so if you
elections?
get a Trump and a Hillary, Luke's going to still vote for Ron Paul.
Ron
Yeah.
Paul.
My,
Or Man Bear
My
Pig.
point is simply that Biden was an accident of history engineered by Wall Street and the big corporations via Claiborne in South Carolina. Let us remember that Sanders was the front runner going into South Carolina.
Yeah.
And he said something stupid, and they were able to jujitsu Biden, and he became the guy. I mean, I've always thought that they want him in there just for a year, and then they put Kamala in, thinking that Kamala would perform better than she has. But at this point, this is why the Michelle Obama thing. It's like they got to
I
run
agree.
somebody like that,
and
or Oprah, or somebody.
Oh, yeah, that's
And
what
I
he's saying,
think
too.
I think if Michelle Obama runs against Trump, it will be a Michelle Obama landslide.
Yes.
Figurative landslide.
Oh, speaking of,
Yeah.
Reagan beat Carter 50% to 41%.
No, but what was the electoral vote?
It was a red state.
489 to 49.
Wow. that's
489 to 49.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
Huge
major
swing. Yeah.
swing.
Yeah, I was shorting cardigan sweaters going into the election.
And Michelle,
remember
but
that
this,
reference.
you brought up a good point with Michelle Obama, because I've been talking about this for a long time. This was essentially ensure that Barack Obama could have control of the White House for more than just the 8 years that he was there in office. 4 years with, of course, Biden, because Biden, of course, talks to Obama. Biden is helping him with this presidency. He would, of course, have 8 years probably with Michelle Obama. So we're talking about an indefinite policy making by Barack Obama, which I think would be absolutely devastating for the country.
The thing that we've got to solve in this country is the control of the media, right? Because that's how they maintain power. And this is, again, why I get back to loving what you do, Tim, and this diaspora of libertarian conservative, like truth to power kinds of folks out there who are dealing in facts, evidence, data, receipts, signal, not noise. It's just got to keep growing. And I think that you're seeing, like, for example, with Fox News, right? It's a cable. Everybody's plugged into cable, and the demographic is way old, right? And as that demographic fades away, literally, this will be your time, because people are no longer doing cable anymore. They have all these different ways of going it. But that'll be, I mean, if Michelle Obama runs in 2024, a lot, whether she wins is going to be a lot determined by how powerful CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and all those folks are.
Google and Facebook.
Yeah, let's not forget that.
Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, in the In Trump Time book, I go deeply into the power of the social media oligarchs in Silicon Valley, and how it's just such a corrosive element. And I remember, like, there was a tactical area. This isn't in the In Trump Time book, but it's worth talking about. It's like Zuckerberg came to the White House on a couple of occasions, and it was Kushner who backed policy up from cracking down on the
big tech oligarchs.
On the big tech, yeah. We were there was like a wing of us in the White House who wanted to do that, and as so often it was on things like China or social media, Jared, in his naivete, thought he could romance Zuckerberg, and meanwhile, Zuckerberg, I don't know if you know this stat, but he spent over $500 million in the 6 battleground states alone, which was more than what the Trump campaign spent. So these guys, it's like it's kind of like when on Black Friday, when you buy made in China, you're basically supporting their military. when you go on Facebook or whatever and participate in all that, you do enhance the power of Zuckerberg, of Dorsey at Twitter, at Pichai at Google, and that would be fine if Section 230 were not in place and they couldn't use their mechanisms.
Yeah. Now Kushner made a lot of very bad policies, especially when it came to Saudi Arabia negotiating for them to get a better weapons deal. But I kind of wanted to ask you, since you were there on the ground, do you think anyone in the White House legitimately believed in the 2 weeks to slow the spread? Since I think we're on day 659 of that right now. And do you guys have any regrets about warp speed?
Okay, let's unpack that a little bit. Let's talk about the lockdown. Let's remember where we were. End of January, there were 3 people in the White House who were taking the pandemic seriously. Talk about this in the In Trump Time book. It was me, the president, and Robert O'Brien, the national security advisor, along with his deputy Matt Pottinger. Okay. And if you look at kind of the history of this, it wouldn't be till March. It wouldn't be till March that people began to take it seriously. Both, Pelosi, de Blasio, Cuomo, those folks. It's like, hey, everything's fine. Fauci, everything's fine. And within the White House itself, I was fighting Mnuchin, I was fighting Mark Short, Mulvaney, the chief of staff, right? So when it hit, it's like, I remember Kudlow. It's like, this is basic math, right? It's like Larry goes into a staff meeting. This, again, is in the In Trump Time book. He goes, we got this under control. Everything's minimal. And there's only a few cases. And I'm going, okay, so this is kind of like basic math. If you got 4 cases today and it's going to double, then you got 8 cases next day. It's like, and then see, how long is it before you got a pandemic in the country, right? This is what they didn't understand. So when this thing hit, we had, our cupboards were bare, right, for PPE, right? We'd been left with no gloves, whatever, it's just not there. And we didn't know what we had. And this was so important. It's like we didn't know whether this looks like smallpox with what they call the R naught of like 7, which means for every person who gets infected, 7 more get infected, or whether it was more like the flu where it's like an R naught of 1, right? So the lockdown was a knee-jerk response to, in the fog of war, to something we weren't sure were there. So you can't really, honestly, Monday morning quarterback that.
Was
right?
that Fauci or was that Fauci or Trump?
Hold on.
But
this is a federal. You're talking about. You're asking about a federal question, but the lockdowns were state level.
Well,
Trump even actually came out later and said, they shouldn't do this, but I can't control them.
Pence, stop the spread was a 15-day kind of thing where they asked everybody. But here's the thing. I was one of the first, and there's a New York Times article about this, who I quickly realized, okay, so here's what's going to happen. You got 2 scenarios here. One is like you lock everybody down, and you get, okay, so you slow the rate of infection, okay? But when you're doing that, some other things happen, right? You have a tremendous hit on the economy, and that we had the biggest recessionary drop in our history in that. So that's a problem. But the other part of the problem is that people who are locked down can't go to hospitals to get kidney dialysis, cancer treatments, breast biopsies, colonoscopies. And by the way, if you lock people up like rats in a cage, they're going to start taking more drugs, drinking more, and eating more, and their health is going to deteriorate. So that's something that the Fauciites never clearly understood. Their knee-jerk, and so there became, as we began to realize that, there became the idea where no, we gotta learn how to open this up. And then, like, the best model here, really, ex post, is the Sweden model. Sweden just went for herd immunity. They didn't mask their kids. They didn't shut down. They just went for it. And right now, they're having relatively lower rates of infection than the rest of Europe, because we didn't know a lot of that at the time.
But was it Trump, Fauci, or Pence making these decisions? Or was it a combination of them three? Because a lot of people were bewildered why Fauci was still there for so long. To be honest with you.
Let me do this. Okay. This is me talking to the president. This is me may or may not be telling the president to fire Fauci twice. Okay?
On the cover of the book.
Yes. Awesome. And I did tell the president to fire Fauci twice. And once after my showdown in Chapter 2 in the sit room over the China travel ban, which he was adamantly opposed to, and the president sent me to argue there on behalf. But to your point, Luke, here's the problem I had, and I always felt like custard, like in the White House, right? So in this case, you had two forces in favor of Fauci. You had the big four at the healthcare agencies. It was Hahn at the FDA, you had Redfield at the CDC, you had Collins at the NIH, and you had Azar, Secretary of Health and Human Services. They're all going like, Fauci's the best thing since sliced bread, got to keep him. Okay, that could have been overcome. But the other problem we had was the coward in the Chief of Staff office, acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney. And he and the press corps were, no, can't fire Fauci, too much blowback. And I'm going like Churchill about Hitler. It's like, no. It's like you got to strangle that Fauci baby in the crib. Take the hit, rip the Band-Aid off, do it. But, I lost on that one, and Fauci, he's like in charge of everything now, but he was like demonstrably trying to take out President Trump with what I called his passive-aggressive behavior, and I was the only guy who fought him, Luke. Yeah. You go back and look at the history. I almost got fired once for it, and the true story, and it's like, I was right every time I challenged him, whether it's on the traffic ban or...
Especially in hindsight, with him doing the studies that we're going to be talking about later in the bonus section, in an area where we could discuss this in a bigger deal. But but there's a lot of things that we could get into. And thank you for providing such insight into this, because this is leaving a lot of people asking, what was going on? What was happening here?
One other thing that I emphasize in the In Trump Time book is that Pence never ever should have been in charge of that task force.
Yeah.
That was a stupid scientific and political decision because he was too close to the Oval Office, right? What you needed, and as I argue in the In Trump Time book, it's like you wanted somebody who was tough, smart, who could appeal to both sides of the aisle and would deliver this thing whiskey straight, no chaser. Because look, like it's the Mel Gibson, one of my favorite Mel Gibson movies, like Men Will Die. Americans are going to die. Right, and there's going to be a lot of them or less dying, but people are going to die no matter what you do. So that's not a winning hand. So what you have to do is you have to get your best people in charge and keep politics out of it. And we did not do that. And it gave Fauci in particular an opportunity to manipulate public opinion. I mean, every time his approval rating went up, the bosses went down. There's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that.
He struck me as like old guard general, like a World War I general that was still on staff when World War II broke out. And you immediately realize, like, you put him in charge and he makes a blunder and you realize he's not qualified to lead anymore. You got to immediately remove him and put in a young new general. And I'm still waiting for that to happen.
So do you think it was the influence of all these four horsemen that you detailed that kept Fauci in there, or do you think there was something else that kept him in there?
No, it was a combination. It was initially the four horsemen, literally, of the pandemic, right, in the healthcare bureaucracy. But as Fauci gained purchase in his perch there, and his approval rating was high. He had what we call a high Q rating in TV and things like that. That's where the Mulvaney second act came in, where Mulvaney was too afraid to fire him, and the press people were like, they were frozen in fear with the idea of taking him on. And it's like no. So that's I mean, I hope I can provide you with the background. That's the fun part about the In Trump Time book. It literally is the definitive insider's account of what happened there, because I was there. I kept a journal. I most of the time I was a participant. Sometimes I was observer. But a lot of these stories people just don't understand as to what happened and how it happened. And like, for example, Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short. I mean, one of the reasons why you do not want Mike Pence running the task force is his chief of staff, Mark Short, did not believe there was a pandemic, that he thought this was just kind of the flu. I mean, how can you get a task force moving in Trump time to deal with what the crisis that we were facing if the guy in charge, de facto, didn't believe there was a problem? And by the way, there's a funny story that's darkly funny in the Trump time book about this guy, Mark Short. I mean, early on, think about this. Short decides to send Pence out on Air Force Two out to the Seattle area where the pandemic just was developing. Like, people are dying left and right in a nursing home, and he thinks it's a good idea for Pence to go out there. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, of course, we send our president or vice president out into hurricane zones or tragedies or whatever. But you don't do that in a pandemic, and here's why. It's like, it's not just Pence going out there. It's all his staff. It's all the Secret Service agents. It's the advanced staff. And guess what? Next day, where are they? They're back at the White House, right? And you have the golden opportunity, thank you, Communist China, to wipe out effectively the top level of government. It was insane. And that vice president's office had the highest rate of infection of any unit within the White House because of Mark Short and his stupidity.
Mark Short made the decision to send the vice president into a pandemic hot zone?
Yes.
Wow.
He's the chief of staff.
Yeah.
I mean, look, let me say this. I loved Mike, okay? I had a great relationship with him. There's no sour grapes bitterness here. One time, there's a great story in the Trump Time book about after I did a tilt with Jake Tapper one Sunday, right, which was particularly vitriolic, as it always is with Tapper. I go in the Oval, and we're all standing around, and Mike does this like wonderful impression of me during the debate, like with my hand gestures and everything like that. It was hilarious. I had a really warm relationship with him. But when Mark Short took over as chief of staff midway through the 4 years, it was like this iron curtain descended over Mike, and you could no longer speak to him. Before that, I would brief him regularly. He was open to stuff. He always read the stuff he did. Mark Short comes along, he just walls the guy off, and for all the wrong reasons. So that was all the more reason. There's another story in the Untitled Time book about how I'm the guy, as the Defense Production Act coordinator, I had like 5 warehouses surrounded with FBI agents and Bill Barr on my side to crack down on these SOBs who were price gouging. We were ready to raid them to send a strong signal to anybody who was going to take advantage in the pandemic that they were going to suffer severe consequences. Guess what? Mark Short and the Vice President's counsel, Greg Jacob, prevented us from doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, what are you guys doing? Why are you doing this? This is crazy. I go, Bill, it's like, why can't we do this? And he goes, well, it's the vice president's office. It's like, what can you do? And, well, I called him. It's like, no, this was crazy. So this guy, I'm into like homages and things like that. So there's a lot of that in there. But this was a Shakespearean tragedy, and there's a character in Othello, Iago, who for his own, quote, peculiar ends betrays his principal, right? And this was what Mark Short did. Mark Short basically controlled Pence on the behalf of the Koch network, which is the dark money network of conservative money that loves certain aspects of the Trump agenda, which is deregulation and tax cuts, but loathes secure borders and fair trade because that prevents them from offshoring.
Yeah, it hurts the corporations.
These were the guys in the midst. Mnuchin, Wall Street, Goldman Sachs screwing everything up. Mark Short, Koch network, Larry Kudlow, Wall Street. It's very interesting. The greatest president in modern history, to be clear, but a lot of what he did it in spite of who worked for him rather than because of it.
Yep.
Let's go to Super Chats. If
Yes.
you haven't already, get your Super Chats in. We'll take your questions. Smash the like button. Become a member at timcast.com because we're going to have that members segment coming up around 11 or so p.m. But let's see what all of you guys have to say. Speaking to turkeys, we have this from the Squid who says, turkey sucks anyway. Let's all have ham. and all the rest of the normal foods. Turkey is bland and disgusting compared to anything else you can have.
Maybe
How
wait,
dare
make
you.
it.
I love turkey.
Jeez.
I love turkey
You
too.
got to make
I-
it moist.
Moist.
You make
Dry
it right,
turkey's a
yeah.
little.
Look, you slice it, and you make a sandwich.
There you
And it's
go.
delicious.
You got to make sure it's
Salad.
salted
Granted,
properly.
I'm not eating any bread for the most part anymore. All the bread.
Try the fryer. You know, it's like
Yeah,
you cook it right, it tastes good. You cook it wrong, it's
You know-
like
Bad. Look
You know
at
what
that.
I've learned? I've learned when people say stuff like broccoli sucks or spinach sucks or turkey sucks, you're just cooking it wrong.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's that
Exactly.
simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Salt.
There were
vinegar, and oil,
there were
man.
wars. How many human beings died over making food taste good? East
Yeah.
India Trading Company's like peppercorn, and they're like shooting.
Yeah.
War.
my favorite expression from my 3 years in the Peace Corps was work hard, rice delicious.
Yeah.
Rice, delicious. Is that what you said?
Well, meaning that if you have if you work hard during the day,
Makes your
that
food
what
taste
your
good.
food will taste good.
The Lex Friedman posted on Instagram what we think people from the 14th century would be mind blown by, and it shows like iPhones, and then what they'd really be mind blown by. It shows a bunch of spices on the
yeah.
shelf at the grocery store.
Yes.
All right. Jay says soy turkey is a no-go. My mom has developed a soy and soy extract allergy severe enough for her throat to swell shut.
no.
Yikes, man.
Oof.
Keep your mom safe.
And hydrated.
Well, it's all Frankenstein. It's all GMO.
Just
soybeans.
get the real turkey. We got a 25-pound turkey because we went to the farm and they asked us, like, what are you looking for? And I said, I want your biggest turkey. And they were like, we'll get you the biggest one. And I was like, okay. And then we showed up and they were like, second biggest. And I was like, I should. But
Son of a gun.
it's huge. It's huge. And as they were handing it to us, I was like, I don't know if that will fit in the oven.
It's not gonna fit. Good
And they
luck
were
with
like,
that.
just take all the racks out and just figure it out. And I'm like, oh man.
Boy.
But it's going to take
Project.
like 12 hours to cook. And we are going to have one heck of a turkey, man. All right. Kyle Miller says, Tim, how long until you get Trump on? We've talked to people, not Trump, but people, in Trump's circle. And what we've basically been told is there's absolutely no way Trump would sit down for 2.5 hours on a show like this.
Long time.
So it will never happen.
No, it could happen. We go to Mar-a-Lago.
That's not this show happening. That's us doing like a special sit down half an hour with Trump.
Yeah, like an hour.
There's no way we were told this by multiple people that Trump would come here, sit down, hang out for a couple hours, and they were like, if you would get an interview, it'd be like what Barstool Sports did. I think like Dave Portnoy did that interview with him, right?
Pretty sure.
Yeah, you'd show up, you'd sit down. He'd eventually be like, okay, I think we're out of time. Have a nice day. Thanks for coming. It's been a blast.
what you
and
get.
yeah.
Well,
that's
I would
what
like
you
to
get.
point out, if you want to be president for 4 years, then you can sit down for 2 hours and talk.
He's a
Trump
busy
doesn't
man.
need
Well,
He's a busy man.
to come here and do that to be
Hey,
president.
man,
you know what I
if
mean?
you have patience, you have patience.
But maybe one of our guests on the show will one day be president.
Oh, I
That's
wouldn't
true.
doubt it.
Got a lot of people who are
Maybe.
political, a lot
Great
of politicians,
people,
and
yeah.
hey, some of these people are pretty young, like late 20s. Maybe in 30 years,
Yeah.
we'll be like, wow, I can't believe that guy's on my show.
I
Nice
remember
running
that
for
guy.
president.
I also bet we could get Trump talking and continue talking, and I think it would go on a little bit longer than expected.
him
And I
talk,
think it would
yeah.
be a lot of fun, and it would be a very important conversation.
Someone mentioned like there was a way, if you watch the media interviews Trump's done, to get him going and not stop, was to say he did something wrong or something like that, and then
Yeah.
have him just get into heavy details.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't know. Does that make you think?
I'm
Trump-
staying out of this. There's a reason why I survived 5 years
Yep,
as the president,
yep.
right?
I like that.
I would love to have that conversation.
I have a lot of critical things I would
Well,
like to
no.
address.
Yeah.
See, the thing about Trump is that I'm pretty sure if you, Luke, were like, "What's up with the deal with Saudi Arabia?" He'd be like, "Listen to me, listen. I'll tell you what happened with Saudi Arabia," and he'd just go off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good. We want
Great.
that. We
I
need
know.
that. We want to get a perspective that the mainstream media didn't ask him. The mainstream media was going off on lunatic assertions that had no basis in reality. If there was some actual constructive criticism, I think he would want to listen to it and want to have a conversation about it. I think so,
I
personally.
think you're right.
Yeah.
and about
All right.
industrialization, yeah.
Cheeseburger says, Tim, please, can we just ignore the corporate media now? Colbert, etc. Let's just do our own thing and ignore the evildoers.
Timcast is a corporation.
Timcast is a
Get your
corporation,
facts
but
straight.
corporate media is a reference to like conglomerates,
Timcast.
not
CNN, yeah.
a small 30-person company. We're not even as big as Daily Wire.
It's true,
But
yeah.
the thing about Colbert is, what's happening is you have a lot of regular people waking up. They go to the store and a turkey, which cost $20 last year, is $50 this year, and they're like, "Whoa, $50 if they can get one." There's a lot of areas where you get these high-profile blue checks. They're tweeting out pictures like, "Look at all these turkeys," and then you've got Middle America places where people have no turkeys, and they're like, "What is this?" Like, no one. The craziness about what the media is doing right now is they're constantly just Potemkin supermarketing, everything that's going on. Potemkin gas prices. They're saying, look how cheap it is here. Look at all the wonderful abundance here. And then regular people are sitting in their empty living room with their empty fridge just being like, what is going on? But it keeps a lot of people in those areas under wraps.
Let's not forget the Jimmy Carter cardigan sweater moment.
What was that? I wasn't alive.
Oh, you don't know about this?
Yeah,
okay,
I was not living.
So let me take you back to the 70s because my first job was in the Department of Energy, and my job was to figure out how to get us off foreign oil because we never imagined we could do what we did under President Trump, which is become energy independent. So what happened, Tim, back in those days to start the stagflation was OPEC cartel basically through the Saudis did an embargo on the American people. And they had two separate oil embargoes where the price of oil went from, $30 to $100 overnight. There were large gas lines. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of that.
Pictures,
Large, and at the same time, we were having food price shocks. So Carter gets elected because of the misery associated with what was happening. And his solution is not to drill more oil or crack down on the Saudis or whatever. It was like wear more cardigan sweaters and freeze in your home.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so he gave this famous speech, right, where he's sitting and the lights are like dark and he's got he's like, look, the guy's like a former Navy nuclear guy. He's got no sense of look at this beautiful studio here. If he'd done it in this studio, he might have got away with it and had like Christmas tears on the sweater. But no, it was like a really dark vision. And people go, I don't want to live in that America. And so, here we go. It's like the tofu Thanksgiving. I don't want to live in that America. Yeah. So this could be Biden's cardigan sweating moment. You heard it here first on the Tim Pool Show.
I would love to see Joe Biden.
3 days before Thanksgiving.
Joe Biden comes out tomorrow, the day before Thanksgiving, because news, don't eat turkeys. People are complaining. He says, listen, tofurkey is delicious. Americans are strong. They don't eat turkeys. Eat your soy, America. And then everyone's going to be like, approval rating just drops to 0.
5%.
Although he might go up a little bit in Iowa, right?
Yeah.
Where they make the soy?
Yes.
They're going to be like, yeah, soy. Woo.
Tofurkey stock is
All right. Junior V says, I cannot wait to see how the mainstream media spins the Black Friday mob robberies of stores and innocent shoppers. Oh, yeah. Did you see what's happening in San Francisco with the people, 25 cars pull up, 80 people run into, a Nordstrom or something?
Yeah, Nordstrom.
And then in Union Square at a Louis Vuitton, they're raiding buildings because they're getting away with it.
It hits close to home. My CVS, which is right beside the building where I live in D.C., just closed because of all the vandalism and the theft at the thing. So it's like
Best Buy's taking a hit, and their stock took a major hit because of the mass robberies.
Yeah, it's
so. I'll tell you this. You know what I see happen? I just think the country's collapsing.
There is that. We're in a 50-50 country right now, and the progressives have been in the ascendancy, and everything they're doing undermines us economically, socially, culturally. And boy, are people fed up with that in the flyover country and Main Street. And again, to Lydia's point, look, I've never seen nothing like this. Like during the Vietnam War, okay, the kinds of demonstrations that happened in Washington was massive. It's like stuff that happened now with the BLM, whatever, around the White House. That was mild compared to what you saw in D.C., but it was
in terms of size or violence.
In terms of size, but that's it. The violence back in the '60s, there were huge crowds, but there was not the kind of violence that you're seeing. So you have that kind of difference, and then you got the '70s stagflation. We're going to really experience that again. The '80s was relatively prosperous. The '90s were. That was like the boom of the decade. It's like, so this is like we're way outside in pandemic. Remember, the last pandemic we had was 1918 with the flu. And this one, look, one of the things I get one of the things in the In Trump Time book was my quest to write an executive order which would have gotten to the bottom of how the virus came to America, right? And we've done presidential commissions for Pearl Harbor, the Kennedy assassination, the BP oil spill. I just want to say that as the guy who was like at the center of this, if I had been able to get the original genome of the virus from communist China at the time, we could have got a vaccine that would have been more sophisticated and quicker than we did. So it's not insignificant that we weren't able to do that. So I don't think we get to the end of the pandemic until we understand the beginning of it. And I think that's a fair question that everybody should have on their mind.
All right, we're going to read this one from Red Rumax. He says, UK is advertising crickets and cheeseburgers on public transport. I saw a huge poster on the tube today. Could not believe my eyes. Now, I will say we cooked a cricket bread. Remember, Ian?
Yes.
And it was not good.
No.
Cricket bread?
Not the best. It was
Not
cricket flour, crickets ground up into
You-
powder.
It has to be croissant, boys.
Yeah, we should have made a
Cricket
cricket
croissant.
croissant.
Yeah.
They know
So-
nothing
so-
here.
so I will
Come on,
say-
everybody knows that.
Butter.
Cricket flour is basically just milled cricket, and it doesn't have anything in it.
gross.
It doesn't have anything in
Yeah.
it that functions like bread.
Does it have as much protein as tofurkey?
It's an probably more. But the problem is it's got an astringent flavor to it.
Yes.
So if done right, I would say it was not good. It was food, and I will tell you this: if like I went in the kitchen and there was nothing and there was cricket bread, I'd eat it and I would not be upset.
Yeah, we made it in a bread maker, but for sure, if you made like a no bake bread, like with some sugar, some salt, you can make it taste really, really
Is
good.
there
Yeah.
the underlying question of why?
Why do we do it?
Curious, yeah.
Well, so when the cicadas came,
It's like, should I go to the moon or make cricket bread?
well, they're advertising eating cricket. They're telling everybody to eat
I
bugs.
see.
Yeah,
Who's doing that?
in the UK, they got advertising
UK,
everywhere. The
interesting.
media was saying all last year, eat cicadas. And I'm like,
What?
please,
Why?
please don't eat bugs. There was a restaurant. There was a restaurant in Leesburg, Virginia,
Yeah.
that was picking cicadas off the wall, in their backyard,
And
and
cooking them.
serving it
Yes.
to people. And the health department said you can't take bugs off the ground and sell it to people. And they were, and CNN was like, oh, look at all the people eating cicadas.
Yeah, you combine the proteins in Guinness Stout and the crickets, and somehow in England it tastes better. That's
Well,
what
do you know
that's
the,
what you were missing.
Yeah,
you know the
okay.
story.
Or preferably, you drink like 6 bottles of Guinness Stout before
Skip the
you eat the crickets, and then
do you know the
and
story?
then it'll
It's not
taste
so
good.
good.
You know the story
Drink
about
hard,
Guinness?
crickets delicious.
Yeah.
Do you guys know the story about how about Guinness?
Yeah.
And there,
I
so
do.
I read this in one of those trivia books, and it may not be true, but there's this book, and it said the story of Guinness. They used to have the big vats where they make the whatever you call them, where they make the booze, right?
Yeah.
They make the beer. And when sanitation became a thing around the Industrial Revolution, they cleaned everything out. When they started brewing the beer again, people noticed it didn't taste as good. Something was missing. And so they didn't understand what was missing. So they, checked, and they were like, everything's the same. But what they didn't realize, and again, this may not be true. I just read it in a book. I'm saying it's very careful because I don't want to get sued. What happened was rats would climb into the vats to drink it and then drown and die and sink to the bottom
Delicious.
and then decay.
Oh,
So they replaced it with fish oil, and it brought the flavor back or whatever.
Okay.
I don't know if that's
Anymore.
true. Again, I
so
read it in a
curious
weird
now.
Lydia,
book.
you are a lovely shade of green for the holidays.
Oh, gross. Thank you. Yeah.
Who needs a Christmas tree when you've got Lydia?
Strong. Yeah, right. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Here we go. Joshua says, Tim, don't worry about the turkey shortage. You can still buy a rotisserie chicken at Costco for $4.99.
That's right.
I mean, hey, how
We went
about
to
instead of a
war
turkey,
over that.
everybody gets a rotisserie chicken?
I like
chicken.
that.
Why is it
But
that
it's
chicken?
half the size it was last year.
Yeah, that's
Right, they're getting
That's
smaller. Well,
regulation.
we got our own chickens, but we're not going to eat them.
That's right.
We got about 15 chickens now.
Those $5 chickens are probably modified and injected.
I
with
don't think
some-
they're the same
Yeah.
DNA
They
as
laying
actual
hens
chickens.
you have? Is that what you
We have
do your eggs and
10 laying hens. Well, we have, I think, 7 laying hens, and then we have 3 pullets. Actually, they may be, they're pullets. They're not quite adult yet. And then we've got 1 rooster, and then 4 other cockerels.
Did they wake you up in the morning?
They wake Ian up.
The rooster does, yeah. Although I'm starting to sleep through it. I talked to my mom last night. I got these chokers for the roosters where you put them around their neck and then they go, so they don't really scream very much. She was like, "That's so cruel."
Yeah, we can't.
It
do
reinforced. I don't want to. I'd rather just tough it out.
I read too many horror stories where, what happens? They have heart attacks. The roosters will try and they'll freak out.
I'm going to let the
Stresses
rooster
them out.
do his thing. We'll move him to the farm eventually, I think, is the plan.
So, yeah, we're going to be moving the Black Stars and Dorothy to the new place. So they can have their own little, chicken life.
Chicken heaven.
But we got the most luxurious chicken
It's
coop.
amazing.
It's Chicken City.
It really
It's
is.
massive. These chickens are
Free
the
range, yeah.
1% of chickens, man.
Yeah.
Protected. They got this hanging water thing. They got their food.
You
They're-
have chicken races out there or anything?
What was that?
Chicken
No,
races?
but we're
Yeah.
actually in the process of setting up Chicken City live show. So we're gonna have cameras all over. You gotta see it's massive. It's massive. It's underneath this like house, and it's really huge. So we're gonna put cameras everywhere,
Yeah.
and they're all gonna live stream, and the cameras will rotate periodically, and then people will be able to go to the live stream 24/7 to watch the chickens do their chicken thing.
So I got an idea for you. Okay. So like elevate the chickens up, and then have a pond beneath it, right? And you can do the aquaponics with fish.
You think so?
Right.
You
Well,
think
that's
that'll
how
work?
they do it. Yeah.
It's
that's
rough
like-
though.
Really?
Mosquitoes in the summer. so you
mosquitoes
got
in
to add a
summer.
bunch of stuff.
Because the
miners.
droppings from the chicken.
Yeah, like a fertilizer.
Yeah.
Aquaponics.
Interesting. Yeah. They're playing
Yeah.
garden
Well,
down
chickens sure do poop. That's one thing we
That's
know
very
for
true.
sure.
Yeah.
They are poopy birds. All right. Raymond G. Stanley Jr. says, Peter, sir, if we get that second term you're predicting, can we save our military? Is crap too far ingrained to still have a strong force versus China? Now, crap stands for critical race applied principles.
I see.
So we're seeing all that wokeness in the military.
So let me reflect on one of my experience from the In Trump Time book within the context of Mad Dog Mattis. Okay, this was remember the old saying in Reagan, like personnel is policy, right? Meaning that who you hire is like what your outcome is in the White House and stuff like that. So Mattis gets in there is a 4-star general. He's adamantly opposed to all of the trade policies we want to do. He's adamantly opposed to taking on China. He wants to be an accommodationist, and he spends all of his time disobeying the chain of command. Like no matter what President Trump, the commander-in-chief, would tell this guy, he would not follow those orders. Now think about that. This guy's a 4-star general. If anybody should understand the importance of chain of command, it should be General Mattis. Now, why do I say this in answer to your question? It's like, this is the problem we have in the military. It's not unlike the other bureaucracies where there's a culture that's been adopted where the Pentagon seems to be independent of the leadership. And I'm really surprised that this critical race theory has been able to metastasize so quickly in the Pentagon, because it must have been going on during the Trump administration. We just didn't see it happening. So that has to be on our watch. But what the Pentagon needs to be focused on is one thing: military readiness. That's it. Military readiness.
I mean, don't you think it's very important for the military to also be ready to, talk about each other's feelings?
Feelings.
Well, what if there's a soldier? Oh, look, you got a guy in basic training.
Feelings.
But look, there's a guy in basic, right? He's 18, he's enlisted, he's crawling through the mud,
Yeah.
and then he
yeah.
starts crying.
Yeah.
And shouldn't the drill sergeant and
Get up,
everyone
soldier. It's okay.
no snuggle puddle, cuddle puddle.
I heard
he's crying. Everyone's got a hug, and then they can go and watch cartoons.
I heard safe spaces are bulletproof, right?
No, I'm deeply concerned about the military. We were able to significantly increase the military budget and kind of get it back towards the trajectory it needed to be, but we're woefully unprepared for what is likely to be our leading military threat, which is China. I mean, you're seeing the whole doctrine of peace through strength, Reagan, Trump, right? I mean, think about this. We come in, and Trump, everybody understands he's a tough SOB, right? So what happens immediately? North Korea missiles, they stop flying those things, right? Iran kind of backs off from all the crap it's doing. We're able to put tariffs on China without it going berserk, right? But as soon as Trump's gone, it's like what is China doing? Yeah, are we watching? It's like they're throwing aircraft across Taiwanese space. They're threatening
They went
everybody.
up to Alaska and Hawaii.
Yeah,
they're getting in our faces.
Yeah, they're getting right in our faces. They're calling. By the way, the summit that just happened. I don't know if you watched that, but that term, like when Xi Jinping called Joe Biden his quote old friend.
Oh, that was good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man, that is some kind of insult in China, baby.
Boy.
No, it was because I think Psaki was asked.
Yeah.
Peter Ducey said something like, Biden and his old friend Xi, and then they were like, I assure you, Biden is not friends.
Oh.
And so Xi Jinping was then like, my old friend, Joe Biden, as like,
Yeah, that's an insult. Yeah, for sure.
Murphy Tries DIY says, Tim wouldn't answer a call from the Situation Room because he would think it's a call for extending his car's warranty. Actually, that's incorrect. I don't answer calls to extend my car warranty out of fear it may actually be the Situation Room. The other way around.
Well, hey, by the way, Tim, if you didn't answer that phone, we'd come find you.
That's great.
Okay.
No, that's fine by me. Look, my phone
And if the
rings,
Trump administration was looking for you, it wouldn't be bad news, okay? If the Biden administration comes to calling, that's
out.
a totally different.
my phone rings. I don't care what it says. I don't answer it.
Yeah.
Same.
Because
I don't do that anymore.
By the way, on a personal note, just so you understand, it's like how Washington works. It's like right now, I'm under attack by this subcommittee that Claiborne runs. They're trying to get me to testify.
Did you get subpoenaed?
Yeah. But there's a good story here because it's like they keep sending me these emails as they say, and I get an email a couple of days ago, and they say, look, here's your subpoena. If you tell us that you got it, then we'll consider it served. I say, yeah, sure, right? I got it, right? So what happens the very next day, right, at 10 in the morning, and I'll actually show you the video of it because I took an iPhone of it. Sure enough, a sheriff shows up with a subpoena, come knocking on your. These people, all they're trying to do, like, intimidate you. And like that woman in Colorado who they're branding a domestic terrorist, and the FBI sends like the 6 agents to, and like tears her apartment up, her house up to find whatever it is that's not there that they're looking for. I mean, this is the big concern. This is part of the problem I'm seeing. It's like the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland has become essentially a jackboot. And the FBI, as an extension of that, I'm sure that most of the agents in there do not want to do that. But I would love to see some more resistance within the FBI. And I'm calling on that right now to kind of like, hey, slow down a little bit, because mothers who are worried about their kids shouldn't be face search warrants. But anyway, that was an interesting story.
It's a bummer because I grew up with the X-Files FBI, and they were cool.
Yeah, they were cool.
Even like outside of Mulder and Scully, when they had the actual FBI, there's like, hey, we're tracking down a murderer, and we're gonna help protect people. But now it's like it's so political.
Well, see, I grew up with the J. Edgar.
I know that stuff too.
Yeah.
So I know how it can go bad. But it's like it seemed like things were going pretty good. Yeah. But this whole Russiagate thing, it's been broken wide open now. It's shown to be a hoax. Bull Durham's like indicting people and things like that. But that went on like for 4 years. For 4 years.
It was before the Trump administration even started.
Yes.
And it was still going on up until Durham started making these moves. Now Rachel Maddow's finally forced to be like, oh, I was, lying the whole time. Well, she was just really dumb. I'll put it that way. It's strange how when the initial reports were coming out, like my content was all like, hey, we'll look at it and we'll see what they say, and I don't know enough about what's going on to make a judgment, but we'll see what the investigation reveals. And then once it came out, like there was no collusion, it was all a hoax. I was like, okay, we're done with this, right? No, they didn't let it go.
They keep doubling down, tripling down on. I mean, I was just watching Comey Rule on Netflix, right? And the whole thing is misinformation and disinformation because it sincerely kind of presents the story as if the Steele dossier were true, correct, right? And you go through the whole thing, and if you look at it's like the prologue, but to the In Trump Time book I call the Rashomon election. I don't know if you guys or Lydia, you ever seen Rashomon? Okay, so this is a cool movie. Let me pimp a movie here for a minute, right? The greatest director in Japan's history is Akira Kurosawa. right? He was the guy who did the original Seven Samurai, right? Which they made a Western version of, things like that. But he did a movie called Rashomon, and it was basically a violent crime seen through the eyes of multiple individuals, right? And every person who saw it had a different version of what the events are like. And I feel like we're in this Rashomon world right now, with the FBI and CNN and this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, here's the thing. Let me just say this. 4 years in the White House, I saw so many stories that were quoted anonymous sources that were just flat out wrong. Flat out wrong. And I kept thinking to myself, if I know they're wrong because I'm inside, what about the people who are reading this who aren't inside?
That's right.
Right? And I got this rule. Woodward, in the In Trump Time book, I take him down, okay? Because there's a story about me in the Situation Room, and I report how the events happen. Woodward reports the same events with a totally different spin, right? Based on 2 anonymous sources. And my rule with people like Woodward are 2 anonymous sources do not equal a fact.
Right.
And that's the way journalism has gone to. And
well, here's how they do it. They'll say a source close to Nancy Pelosi's office reveals that she's planning to impeach, Joe Biden or something.
Yeah.
And then it turns out the person close to her office is a homeless guy sleeping out back behind her office. well, hold on. They're telling the truth. He is close to her office. And he's out in the back going like, werewolves are taking over the White House and Nancy Pelosi will impeach Biden. You wait and see. And they're like, write it down and publish.
Would you be surprised to know that a number of reporters knew that I was going to be subpoenaed before I did?
Not surprising.
Of course not.
Now think about that. Think about that. Think about that.
How did they find out?
Well, come on. People are leaking.
They leak it.
Yeah, all the classified information.
Yeah.
Don't
So
intelligence agencies work with the mainstream media.
I want to read a couple more super chats before we go to the member segment. But 'cause I noticed a lot of people are saying spatchcock the turkey.
Yes, I hear good things.
What?
Let's try
What
that.
does that
Yeah. So spatchcocking is where you cut it open and you butterfly it, you lay it flat, and it helps it cook more evenly.
And
It's supposed to be super good.
Maybe
I
you could
like
fit it into the oven.
the traditional 12-hour bake.
Yeah,
That's
but
a
you're
long
going to have to
time.
put it at a diagonal in the oven.
Yeah,
still.
if you try
Well,
to
people
lay
are
it
saying
flat,
smoke it. They're saying spatchcock and then put it in smoker.
grinding
Sounds
is good
amazing.
too.
I'll tell you this. The best brisket I've ever had in Texas. When we were in Texas, literally out of the 7 days we were there, I had 1 day where I didn't eat brisket.
My gut is still recovering. We had a little bit of brisket today. I was like prepared to be disappointed.
It was chain food brisket.
Yeah.
It was not good. All right, so we'll do one more here. This is important. Catherine McGrath says, did Jimmy Carter really get attacked by a giant rabbit?
I have no friggin' idea.
All right.
Yeah.
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the member segment where we're going to talk about the deep, dark secrets. So make sure you go to timcast.com, become a member. You can, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to this channel. You can follow us basically everywhere at Timcast IRL. Follow us on Instagram. You can like our videos and help them spread. You can follow me personally at Timcast. And of course, I think you've got something to shout out.
Navarro Unchained. Okay, let's rock.
But you've got a book, I think you've mentioned.
I think I have the In Trump Time book here, and yes.
I like that photo much more
By the way,
now.
a little breaking news for you. Tomorrow morning, press release is going out where I'm actually recommending another book to buy at the holidays in conjunction with this. It's called The Real Anthony Fauci by Bobby Kennedy Jr. And this is my account of Fauci during the year of the plague. And Kennedy comes at it from the previous decades where Fauci was there. And I think that as a gift for the holidays, by the time you get to the end of those two books, you will have a very different view of Fauci if you still think he's Santa Claus.
I think we got it.
I know where you guys are coming from.
I heard great things about that Bobby Kennedy book. I'm excited to read your book. Thank you so much for coming on. I got a million other questions I want to ask you, but I'll save it for another time.
Are you a Bernie bro? No.
That hurt my feelings. I'm hurt. That hurt.
Did you notice, like, when I said that for the rest of the show, he didn't speak to me at all?
I had some questions. I got a lot more, you know, but
in fact, the eyelids of the Gisane T-shirt, the mask there came off briefly when I said that. It was
probably, it was shocking.
Her eyes popped up.
It was surprising, but we got a lot more to get into. I'm excited to talk.
But let me pimp your T-shirts too to make up to it.
No worries, no.
Get this T-shirt. Go to wherever you're supposed to.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I do other videos on, of course, a different YouTube channel, but I have more private, intimate, crazy discussions on LukeUncensored.com. I released an important video today. I'm going to be releasing another one tomorrow about how to talk to your loved ones in a pragmatic way, especially when you're going to be meeting with them, sitting down with them. Luckily, if you are very blessed to have a turkey, you will be eating one, and it's an important opportunity to raise important issues. I'm going to be talking about that all on LukeUncensored.com. Hope to see some of you guys there.
It's great to meet you, man. Thanks for coming and
this is awesome.
Releasing the info. This is deep stuff. I'm looking forward to going deeper. I'm Ian
Break
Crossland.
a little news too.
Yeah, let's get real. And you can follow me at IanCrossland.net if you want to get in touch with all my socials. Thanks for coming.
And I just wanted to say before I go that the Rashomon effect is where the two people are looking at a 6/9 and they can't figure out which is which. So there's actually an effect named, I think it's inspired by this movie that came out in 1950. Thank you very much for coming, Peter. Had a wonderful time. I'm loving this wisdom from these older generations. You guys may follow me on Twitter at Sarah Patch Lids.
We will see you all at timcast.com in the members only segment. Thanks for hanging out.
Bye, guys.